Welcome back. I'm delighted to be joined now by the chairman of the Commission for Racial Equality, Gerbert Singh. Gerbert, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Welcome back. I'm going to start off with something that Sir Brian Mahwini, the former chairman of the Conservative Party, just said. The CRE runs the risk of becoming dangerously close to losing its impartiality over this pledge that you've invited party leaders and candidates to sign. How do you rebut that charge?
I simply don't accept that position. I've read this morning a number of suggestions that the CRE has indeed colluded with the Labour Party around this pledge. The facts are that this pledge was first of all agreed in 1976. We felt this earlier on this year that as the election was coming that we need to put in place this year's pledge. We approached all 5 main political parties. We had detailed discussions with all 5 leaders, and as a result of those discussions it was agreed that the pledge would be put in place.
At what time did you tell them that you expected candidates also to sign up rather than just leaders?
That particular principle, the need to extend it to cover existing MPs, was something that we debated at some real length in all 5 meetings that took place. During the course of those discussions, it emerged that it would be an extremely sensible idea to invite all MPs to also sign the pledge. That would be a demonstration of all MPs standing shoulder to shoulder on this very important issue. It was publicly done, it was very openly discussed, and indeed all political parties welcomed the initiative.
Before you established the website, which obviously everybody who has a computer can access now and see who's signed and who hasn't signed, 3 names were leaked to the press, 3 Conservatives who'd said they would not sign up. Did you or anyone on your staff have anything to do with that?
Nobody from the CRE leaked those 3 names. Absolutely clear about that.
And if you discovered that someone on your staff, not you, but someone on your staff had done, what would your view be?
I would take appropriate action against those individuals.
So it is unacceptable?
It is completely unacceptable for the CRE to actually leak those names. It was precisely because the media were saying, surely you've produced this compact, you've had MPs now responding to it, you've now got over nearly 400 people signed up, we're led to believe. What is it that you're keeping secret from us? It was precisely for that reason that I felt it was vitally important that all names, the names of all individuals who'd signed the compact should actually go on the website, including those, for whatever reason, had said, no, we're not going to sign.
Yeah.
The need for openness and transparency, I think, is absolutely the case, but most certainly it is not the CRE that would have leaked those names.
OK. When you embarked upon this, and it was building, as you've said already, from something that has been going for quite some time, and we've talked about it before, it was clearly your intention to keep race out of the election. That was what you wanted to do because you felt it to be right. There is a perception abroad, and it's a balanced perception across the political range of newspapers, that quite the opposite has happened, and it has now become a burning stick at the very heart of this election. Do you take some responsibility for that?
I mean, the reality actually is that the compact has led to a debate which I'm not terribly happy with. I mean, the fact is that rather than talking about the real issues which concern minority communities, you know, the issues about the evils of discrimination that we all are absolutely aware of, there's been a major deflection from discussing those issues to matters like political parties squabbling with each other to establish who is more or less racist than the other. Now that is something which frankly I'm saddened by. What we need to do is to put that aside and get down to discussing the real issues which I think are profoundly important to all of us and profoundly important to minority communities in this country.
Yeah, but there is a perception, and one of the newspapers has done a list of photographs of everybody who is on your commission and given little biogs and what have you. I mean, you can't escape from the simple truth that, to quote somebody, it's all a bit Labour.
What the people on the commission? Well, actually, I have to say I don't know the politics of those individuals. I have no idea.
One of them's a political advisor to a member of the cabinet.
Surely. No, I think he's actually a member of the NEC. The Labour Party NEC. I mean, I do not know the individual politics of my 14 colleagues, in fact, and nor is it actually terribly material for me to know. The fact is that those commissioners are there bringing their expertise around race relations as opposed to their political background. And frankly, there is never discussion at my commission meetings about the politics of the individuals who actually sit on that commission. It would be wholly inappropriate.
Frank Field has written a piece, and I mentioned it earlier on in the conversation with our newspaper reviewers, who talks about the race relations industry. Now, Frank is a very honourable, progressive man. I'm sure that everybody would agree with that. But he takes one very simple example of race crime within the capital here. And he says in the case of Stephen Lawrence, because that was perceived and allegedly to be a white-on-black attack, it's front-page news. Everybody talks about it and is concerned about it. Damilola Taylor is thought possibly to have been a black-on-black crime, and it's almost the crime that dare not speak its name. Has the race relations industry got too inwardly focused on what it's really all about, rather than looking out and realising what the reality out there on the streets is, what people actually think and talk about?
The reality, actually, is that the CRE is not simply concerned about black people or Asian people. The CRE is concerned about discrimination by anybody. And to that extent, I mean, for example, 10% of people who come to the Commission seeking help and assistance are white. People who actually say that they have been victims of discrimination. So that, frankly, to my way of thinking, the Damilola Taylor issue is as equally profoundly disturbing as the tragic death of Stephen Lawrence. Now, it does not actually matter who perpetrated the violence. The fact is that there have been 2 lives lost, and that is too many.
Sure.
And that actually it doesn't matter who's actually committed the crime, that we should be condemning that crime irrespective.
It's been a perception over the last few days, Gerbucks, that Labour were at the heart of this campaign, and they had all the right songs, all the right tunes, as it were, within the argument, and the Liberal Democrats alongside them, and that the problem was with the Conservative Party. And yet, in a number of the good newspapers this morning, right across the spectrum, they are saying the real problem lies with Labour. Your predecessor, Sir Herman Ouseley, is saying there's a real problem there. Great with Asians, not good with Afro-Caribbeans, that they have not got enough candidates in place, that Labour is actually failing on everything that you stand for and believe in.
Yeah. Well, the reality is that I believe that all political parties are failing. We've only got to look at Westminster, where 9 MPs are drawn from minority communities. That, frankly, is just simply not good enough. And no political party can actually stand up and say, well, actually, we've got it right, as opposed to the other political party. All are, frankly, failing on this particular issue. And until they begin to face up to the fact that there is gross underrepresentation within Westminster, and that they have a duty to tackle that issue head-on, then, frankly, no political party can say that we've got it right.
So would you like the Labour Party to introduce quotas of ethnic representation?
No, not quotas, targets. And there is a difference between the two. I would actually expect to see, after this election, each political party looking at the whole issue of representation, to look at what steps they can put in place to improve the position. And indeed, the 3 major political parties, in discussions that I've had with them, have committed themselves to doing that.
Sure.
That they will look at how they can deal with both membership issues, but also selection issues.
2 final points, and very quickly. Anne Widdecombe, writing in 2 of the newspapers, is reported this morning as saying, or by implication, that the Macpherson assumption that if somebody says a crime was of racial motivation, then the police should operate on that basis. She says that's making policing very difficult, and it's making life as tough for white people as it is for black people. Is she right on that?
I don't accept that position, and nor, in fact, do most chief constables in this country accept that position. I mean, the position on that is simple, that if a victim perceives themselves to be a victim of race violence, then the police should start from the perspective that that may well be the case. During the course of
may well be, not is.
May well be the case. And that during the course of the investigation, they will establish for a fact whether it is or not. At that point, they will either say, well, actually it is, or it isn't. Now, I think that is what Macpherson was actually talking about. Yeah. That is, I think, is the crucial point.
All right. Final point. It is always good to have you on the programme, and I always greatly enjoy our conversations, but I've never interviewed you at the end of such a tough week, and it has been a tough week for you in the CRE. What have you actually learned from the real world in which you operate over the last 7 days?
I think that the last 7 days have been, I mean, reflecting back on the 7 days, it's principally about a sense of sadness that actually during the course of the week, that the debate has shifted to something which is really not terribly helpful. that actually what I want to see is a positive discussion about race relations in this country, a positive, healthy discussion about these matters, as opposed to, frankly, political parties throwing mud at each other. That, I think, is deeply saddening.
And will that suggest to you that you need to do things slightly different in future?
Perhaps, but I'm absolutely convinced that the compact is right. I'm absolutely convinced that the CRE has behaved impeccably, that we have not in any way done anything untoward. I believe that the things that we've done and put in place have been absolutely spot on. The compact is robust, it's sensible, and that what I want to see is all politicians signing up to it.
Gurbet Singh, a pleasure, as always. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you very much.
The Chair of the Commission for Racial Equality, and coming up next, the Culture Secretary, Chris Smith.
The inventor who cleaned up. The comedian who's laughing all the way to the bank. Kenny Scott, fast buck. High flyer, easy money. This Sunday, we out the incredibly rich, the definitive rich list, only in the Sunday Times.
Hi, my name is ZG, and this is a Milky Way bar. Now, Jack's mum, right? She's always going on and on that Jack eats like a horse, that he's always starving, always wants more, and it costs a fortune to feed him. But when I asked her why she gives him Milky Ways, right, she says, well, I don't want to spoil his appetite. She's a bit of a radish short of a salad, your mum, Jack. Hey!
Sweetie darling, no. New Crave Control patches from Boots, selected Superdrug stores and leading pharmacies. They could work for you.
Next week on GMTV, up close and personal with Hollywood's Nicolas Cage. Hitting the high notes, sex bomb Denise Van Outen. A right royal laugh with Ricky Tomlinson. And we have an in-depth interview with Jerry Halliwell, her new single and those love life rumours, all on GMTV next week.
Earlier in the programme, we heard about the effect of the foot and mouth epidemic on Britain's £13 billion tourism industry. I'm joined now by the Cabinet Minister responsible for tourism, the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, Chris Smith. Chris, good morning to you.
Good morning.
I'm going to come to that in a moment, but I want to start on the subject that's dominated most of the other conversations, and that's the issue of race and the pledge and the Commission for Racial Equality. Brian Mawhinney said a few moments ago that the Commission was in danger, because of all of this over the last week or so, in danger of becoming partisan. Do you share that fear?
No, not at all, because I think what the Commission did, and it was an entirely sensible and understandable thing, was to say to all the political parties, look, when you're campaigning for the election, whenever it's going to be, will you please say at the outset, we're not going to in any way try and stir up racial intolerance or racial hatred in our campaigning work. And that seems to me to be absolutely common sense politics, and I was extremely pleased that all the party leaders signed up to that. I think it's got into a bit of a sort of tit for tat between all sorts of different politicians, some of them in the same party, about whether to sign it or whether not to sign it. But the basic point here about when we're campaigning, we shouldn't be playing to base motives of anyone in the electorate, seems to me to be absolutely plain common sense.
OK, and the other point coming from the previous conversations with Gurbet Singh, who you just heard before you came in, when I put it to him that there was the earlier perception that Labour and the Lib Dems had all the good tunes, as it were, and that the Tories were the problem, he said, no, they all have a problem with race. They all have a problem with candidates. They all have a problem with representation. Does that hurt when you hear that?
No, because I think there's quite an element of truth to that. All political parties in this country have not, in terms of black and Asian representation in the House of Commons, done as well as we perhaps might want to do. We've managed to do a bit better over recent years in the Labour Party than perhaps any other party has done, but we're still not perfect, and we still need to make progress. And the CRE pointing out that we still need to make progress seems to me to be entirely legitimate.
But there is a perception out there, however naive it may be, that the Labour Party should be the trailblazers in this. And Sir Herman Ousley this morning says, no, you're not. I mean, great with the Asian community, but doing virtually nothing for the Afro-Caribbean community. And Doreen Lawrence says, just not getting it right.
Well, we do, of course, have quite a number now of black and Asian members of Parliament who sit on the Labour benches. I'm very proud of that. And many of them are doing an extremely effective job. But take just an initiative that I was involved in just this past week, launching the Millennium Awards for individuals across the country. 11% of those awards that go to individuals to help their own communities, 11% of those have gone to people from the black and Asian communities. And that means that some of that Millennium Commission money is getting right down into the black and Asian communities, and I hope doing some good there.
All right, final point, and quickly on this one, you did mention yourself about divisions within the party as well. Tam Diel, Tony Benn and Mark Seddon, member of the NEC, editor of Tribune, say one of the dangers with this pledge is that it suppresses a genuine debate that we should have the guts to have and see off the racist, as it were. That's their perception.
I don't think it suppresses debate. I think all it does is say that in our campaigning work, we're not going to stir up racial intolerance. It doesn't mean that we don't seriously address the very major issues about race relations, about good community relations, about ensuring that as a government, as a prospective re-elected government, we're not going to address these issues sensibly.
OK, fine. Thank you for that. Now, tourism as billed. Richard Tobias, who I know you know very well from the incoming tourist organisation, was in at the top of the programme, and he said £20 million for the big promotional campaign abroad. Could do better than that, but he wants the money sooner. The Treasury are dragging its feet. A, are you confident you're giving them enough to help? And will you give Gordon a nudge to make sure that the money turns up on time?
Well, we're certainly putting some extra money in straight away, and we've already done that, because there's an immediate task to be done, and he's absolutely right to identify a potential problem of the forward bookings. And we know that over the course of the last month and a half or so, the inbound tourism, the foreign visitors coming into Britain, have been a bit down on what they were last year. Not massively down, but a bit down.
20%, he said. He feared 40%.
We think it may be a bit less than 20% over the past month. But the problem is what's going to happen over the next few months.
Sure.
Because the present period is the key booking period for the summer months and into the autumn.
Yeah. The French representative who came over and met with the Duke of Edinburgh and Cherie Blair and you and Janet and the rest of them, the French guy seemed to be saying, oh, it's all going to be fine by the summer. The American guy talked about $1 billion nightmare, a meltdown. Who's right?
Well, they may both be right, because there are different markets here, and there are different approaches that tend to be taken by European tourists and by American tourists. America is the most sensitive market. We know, for example, back in 1991, when the Gulf War took place, there was a major fall-off in American tourism coming into Britain, even though Britain was thousands of miles away from any of the problems which were happening in the Gulf. Nonetheless, the American tourism perspective was that Europe as a whole was not somewhere to go to. And that effect lasted for about 3 or 4 years before the figures really climbed back to what they had been before.
So it could be a disaster come summer.
So that is the real worry that we have, that an initial fall by the American market in particular will then take a long time to recover. And that's why, yes, we do need to prepare for serious marketing, promotion, information work into the American market to try and counter any fears that they may have.
In real economic terms, the other thing Richard was saying was that, farming, obviously very important and what have you, but in sheer economics, tourism is potentially an even greater industry. You've actually got your priorities slightly askew.
No, the priorities have to be the same for both, and that's getting foot and mouth eradicated as soon as we possibly can, because that is actually, it's not only obviously the best message for farming, is clearly also the best message for tourism. But in the meantime, whilst we're making some considerable progress against foot and mouth, but we haven't yet eradicated it, nonetheless, we still have to make sure that we throw as many lifelines as we can to the very hard-pressed tourism industry.
Yeah.
Because you're right, it is a major industry. 1.8 million people in this country are employed in or have their jobs and livelihood dependent on tourism. That's a vast portion of the British economy, and we need to do everything we can to make sure we sustain it.
Well, the fascinating final point there, do everything we can. You're a keen hill walker and like getting out of the country and what have you. We understand that there are still many, many country lanes, byways, hill walks and the rest of it that are unnecessarily closed down at the moment. No reason for them to be shut.
Yes.
That's down to local authorities. What's your message to them?
Our message has been very clear for the last 2 or 3 weeks to the county councils who are responsible for closing or opening footpaths, that where a footpath goes nowhere near livestock, there is no reason at all to keep it closed. Now, there are some local authorities, Buckinghamshire is an obvious example, who perhaps for ideological reasons, they're Tory controlled, they've said, no, we're not going to open a single footpath. They've been absolutely adamant about that. I would appeal to them because they are affecting their tourism and hotel businesses in their county. I would appeal to them to think again on that.
And you say that that is party political, partisan?
We don't know. I mean, they have said some. The leaders of the council have said some pretty harsh things about the government in the course of what they've been saying. Whether that's politically driven or not, who knows? Sure. But they, I think, have made the wrong decision about their footpaths.
How are you keeping fit if you can't walk as much as you used to?
With difficulty. I'm longing.
Putting a bit of weight on, Chris.
I'm longing to get back to to being able to walk freely in the countryside, and the sooner that foot and mouth is eradicated, sure, the sooner that will happen.
And I'm sure that's a serious thought that is shared by everybody watching, and also those particularly who work in the relevant industries. Always a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Chris Smith, Secretary of State for Sport, Media and Culture. Now, Secretary of State for News, Stephanie Callister.
Thank you, Alistair. Good morning. The mother of murdered teenager Stephen Lawrence has accused the government of damaging racial harmony by playing politics with race. In a newspaper interview, Doreen Lawrence says the Labour Party is wrong to use the issue for political point scoring. And when asked about Foreign Secretary Robin Cook's speech last week attacking the Conservatives' attitudes to race, she said she also found his comments unconstructive. A man and woman have been charged with the murder of Liz Sherlock, who died after falling under the wheels of a car during a mugging at Euston Station in London. A 23-year-old unemployed woman and a 35-year-old plasterer from North London will appear in court tomorrow. Detectives investigating the murder of Susie Lamplugh are to search an area of countryside in Somerset to try and find her body. The 25-year-old estate agent disappeared 15 years ago after showing a client a property. Forensic archaeologists will dig up woodland near Taunton next week. And some news just in. 2 people have been killed in an apparent suicide blast near a bus in the Israeli town of Kfar Saba. The town is near Israel's border with the West Bank. The area has in the past been the scene of attacks by Islamic militants. No one has yet claimed responsibility for the attack. And in Canada, there's been a second day of violent protests at the Summit of America's meeting in Quebec. Protesters threw rocks and petrol bombs at police guarding the conference centre, where President Bush is heading the meeting. The anti-capitalist demonstrators claim a trade-free zone across the Americas will damage the environment and ignore poverty. Boxing and Hazim Rahman has caused a major upset by knocking out Lennox Lewis in the 5th round to win the WBC and IBF heavyweight titles. After the fight, which took place in the early hours of this morning, Lewis said he wanted a rematch as soon as possible. Rahman, an unknown from Maryland in the US, won the bout after knocking the British champion to the floor with a right punch. That's all from the newsroom. Back now to Alistair.
Steph, thanks very much indeed. Now a look at the weekend weather prospects with John Hammond.
GMTV weather with Puriton. A treatment for family allergies.
Thank you, Alistair. It's not a pretty sight out there. Lots of rain to come over the next 24 hours. In fact, there is an increasing risk of flooding, we think, both today and tomorrow, as that rain keeps falling across parts of the West Country, Wales, the Midlands and southern counties of England. We can move on to the next graphic. I can show you the area which will be affected. Can we move on to the next graphic? No, we can't. So I'll keep talking about the rain, which is pushing in from the west, and the radar picture shows some pretty heavy rain too crossing the country. It's never quite going to reach the eastern side. So good news if you're running the marathon this morning. It should stay dry, not too warm, not too cold either. Dry, increasingly cloudy though for East Anglia and the southeast, but I'm afraid for the rest of the country there will be a lot of rain to come. It's moving eastwards, as I say. It'll be affecting much of Scotland, northern England, down through Wales, the West Country, the Midlands and southern England. Cold enough for snow for a time up over the high ground of Scotland, above around 1,500 feet. The good news though for Northern Ireland, it should improve. We'll see the sun coming out through this morning, just a few showers around, but basically a bright and breezy picture during the course of this afternoon for Northern Ireland, but for the rest of the country, rather wet, except, as I say, for East Anglia and the southeast. It's not going to be terribly warm anywhere. Temperatures struggling to around about 9 or 10 degrees at best. Tomorrow, yet more rain, I'm afraid, for much of the country, but things should slowly improve from the west later on during the course of the day. And that's about it from me. Sorry about the graphics. Back to Alistair.
Brilliantly done, John. I actually thought the car and the headlights and the rain summed up the forecast perfectly.
I'll use it
Thank
again.
you for that. We'll be back here, same time, same place next Sunday. Until then, have a great week. Bye-bye now.
The inventor who cleaned up. This Sunday, we out the incredibly rich, the definitive rich list, only in the Sunday Times.
Edwina, I said to my niece, where's the furniture? It's minimalist, Auntie, she said. Less is more, brave little thing. Oh, dear. Ooh, hold on, this feels strokably soft. It is! Double velvet toilet tissue, and plenty of it. I'll just add my little housewarming gift, and we're getting somewhere. Edwina, surprise! Double velvet, there's toilet tissue and there's velvet.
Baby bio, baby bio. Huh? Oh, hang on a minute. Look, your plants are starving. Where's your baby bio? That's it, feed them.
Baby Bio Original, and now ready to use. Baby Bio.
Oh, it's my nature to nurture.
Now there are 2 ways to treat your skin to a facial. At a beauty salon or at home with Olay Daily Facials cleansing cloths. Every day you can cleanse, clarify and condition your skin. It's a little bit of a facial every day. Olay Daily Facials, proven to cleanse and condition like a facial.
T-shirts from £4.
For 2. Chinos from £10.
For 2. Vest and clam diggers from £7.
For both.
You want to start something? It all starts with Titantron Live.
I'm live with Vince McMahon Tron Active Figure. Other Tron Active Figures with special sensors and rings sold separately. Some assembly required.
Hooby Galooby! Here come the Hoobs! Have lots of Hooby fun on video now! Hoobs!
Oh. Smart. Dig it, sponsored by Smarties. That is smart.
How you doing, guys? Welcome to Sunday Morning Dig It. Now, we've got loads coming up on today's show, so why don't you sit back, relax like me and Jasper, and check out what's coming up on Sunday morning. In PB&J, Peanut learns to dance noodle style. Mikey becomes a trainer for the kindergarten derby. Sabrina finds out being a TV star isn't all it's cracked up to be. And in the second recess, it's career day at the First Street School. And as well as all that, we've got a games console and a game to give away too. But right now it's time for PB&J. And lucky old Peanut's got some pies to taste.
Gotta dance.
Mama, Daddy, watch this. I am the Great Pie Dini.
The Great Pie who?
Cover my eyes, baby butter. The Great Pie Dini can't see the pie he's going to taste. And yet, he will tell you exactly what's in it. Dabbleberry, tuna crust, chocolate sprinkles, and, oh, just a hint of cinnamon.
Well, that is exactly right, Peanut.
Wow.
Very good.
You did it!
Sweetheart, you are going to do just fine in tomorrow's pie tasting contest.
And why not? He's been practicing pie tasting for years.
It's a pie tasting contest, Ernest, not a pie eating contest. Oops.
Oh, right,
Hiya, folks.
Hi there, Jeff.
It's a pleasure to welcome you to the Lake Hoo-Ha Pie Tasting Contest.
Peanut, are you nervous? No way, Jell. I practiced and practiced. I'm totally ready.
We're just waiting for Wanda Raccoon to deliver our special contest pies. While we wait, let me introduce our pie tasting contestants. Contestant number 1, Dr. Babbleberry himself, Flick Duck.
I'm number 1. I'm number 1.
From the other side of Lake Hoo-Ha, let's have a big hand for Team Snooty.
Bootsy? Bootsy? This contest is going to be a piece of cake!
Or should we say, a piece of pie?
And last but not least, contestant number 3, the Great Pidini, Peanut Otter.
This pie is going down.
And here comes Mrs. Raccoon with our pies.
I can't look. I think Bubbles just won the pie tasting contest. Bubbles? Oh, no!
Watch, Bird Alert! Watch, Bird Alert! Wanda Raccoon just dropped all the pies into Lake Hoo-Ha. Oh, Connie, what are they gonna do now?
I guess they could think of another kind of contest.
I've got it! They could think of another kind of contest.